It's probably no different than most anything in life. I guess just to have the respect that, there's a guy that did the best he could with what he had to work with. Again, I didn't have a degree in anything. I didn't have any formal training in anything, and I got involved in an activity that was kind of it was being created almost when I really got involved in it. And there were a lot of big decisions to make, and you look back out there at things we take for granted today, the way we run races, the way they're paired and the way the track is prepared and just the rules. You think, man, I probably got my fingerprints on a lot of that stuff out there, and a lot of it must have been good because they're still doing it. Yeah, drag racing has been great to me. I'm a blue collar guy. Grew up in an area. I didn't have a lot of college. I had a couple of years, but I didn't have a real career. And I got involved in the sport just out of the love of hot rodding. I'm in the 50s. That's what young guys did. And there were drag strips in the area, and I got involved, and one thing led to another, and I somehow or other turned it into a career. And made a decent living and got to do a lot of interesting things, see interesting parts of the world and meet interesting people. So yeah, drag racing's been real good to me.
Single, an easy run for Ron Colson at the wheel of the Hawaiian. And Colson loses control and crosses the center line. That puts him out of competition. The rules read you cannot cross the center line or the outer extremity line, which in this case is the guardrail. And Ron Colson out of competition as the Hawaiian going out of control.
We have the competition director of the NHRA, Mr. Steve Gibbs, here to give us an explanation on the Ron Colson Hawaiian centerline disqualification. Steve?
Well, the purpose of the rule, Steve, is to provide the drivers with a guideline to maintain control of their car. And despite the fact that he was on a single run, he was obviously not in control of the car, and that's the reason for the disqualification. So it's there for the protection of the driver as well as the people alongside the track.
Really, you have to walk a mile in someone's shoes to really understand what it's like. But it's a tough job. It's exciting when things are going smooth and you're standing out there and the races are going good and the weather's clear. But when you've got the ugly situations, dealing with the weather, dealing with the accidents, dealing with the bad things that do come along, and that's when it's hard. That's when there's times at night that it's hard to sleep when you go through the hard times. I guess I'm pretty low-key by nature. It takes quite a bit to get me, up on the tire, and I think that that was a benefit to just my personality, and but I loved it, and I love the people, and I like to try to make things better, and you dealt with the problems as they come down the line, and there was nowhere to go to school for this. You just flying by the seat of your pants basically, and it all seemed to usually work out. If I guess my thing was to try to do the right thing whenever something came along and you had to make a decision. And I guess I had a little bit of walking around sense, common sense. I think that's something, there's no college courses for that. And, I'm not slapping myself on the back, but I think I had some common sense to help me through.
How did you deal with those racers who didn't use common sense in the pits?
Well, you just have to deal with it. Sometimes you got to go over there and you can just talk to them. Sometimes you got to get in their face. Sometimes you got to throw them out. Luckily, I didn't have to throw many guys out. And I'll be honest, I had more trouble with guys who, I'll call them wannabes, that I did the rule, the top of the line professional guys. I guess I was fortunate in that I kind of grew up with a lot of these guys on the same age as the Perdomes or the McEwens or the Colettas, or so we kind of grew up together. I've known them people since I was in my 20s and they were in their 20s, so it was easier for me to go over and deal with some of these situations that came along than it would have been for some guy that would have been 20 years younger that didn't have that same background. So that was a tool I had kind of in my, arsenal as we grew up together. And I think I developed a fair amount of respect along the way to where if we did have a problem and I had to come up with a decision, that generally people would accept what I had to do and understand it. They may not like it, but I think they understood that I was doing what I had to do.
What was the general penalty for somebody that mixed an M-80 with a can of nitro in the pits?
Oh, just go over and talk to him. I might have been the guy. I probably played with fireworks as much as anybody else. There's a time and a place, but yeah, I think back in those days, everybody had a little more fun. Things weren't as wrapped up as tight. You didn't want to see anybody get hurt or do anything really stupid. But we did have some pretty good times. And if it was getting out of control, you'd take them over, take them behind the building and talk to them. It wasn't one of these things, well, you're parked or you're $10,000 fine or something like that. I mean, we just dealt with it. And most of the times it was just, hey, let's cool it. We don't need any of that, And some pretty interesting incidents happened like that, but in the end, it all worked out.
And for Dom Babel from the start, as the Texan forwards the Blue Max through the trap to stop the clock, and still again under 6 seconds. It's a convertible. The roof has come off. The windshield is missing. Raymond Beadle and the Blue Max crew are going to be faced with a monumental repair job to get that car ready for the final. Well, in the Blue Max pit, crews are hard at work. Kenny Bernstein, a fellow competitor who was eliminated in an earlier round, has volunteered one of his spare bodies to the Blue Max crew. They brought it over to the Blue Max pit, and while they're sawing the top of the Blue Max off, this plastic body is being sawed off. The body from Bernstein's car is being tailored to fit.
We're taking my spare body that we carry in my trailer at all times for things like this, and we're going to take the roof off of this spare body and we're going to put it on the Blue Max on top of their car so they can go win the race.
The scene is hectic in the Blue Max pit. Racing ingenuity, cutting up a tray to make reinforcing straps. Even Raymond Beadle is working. Raymond, will the car be as good being fixed this way as it would ordinarily?
Well, if we had a little more time, we could fix it a lot better. I mean, if the car runs real fast again, it could possibly blow the roof off again, but I don't think so. I think we can get on there strong enough. But the car just run real fast, and it just right in the lights. I just fixed to get the parachute, and it blew the windshield out, and the roof come off.
How will you anchor the new roof on the old?
We'll just pop rivet it, and then we'll put some aluminum back behind it, and we're going to put a little bit of fiberglass on it. It'll set up pretty good. I think it'll be all right.
A confident man, Raymond Beadle. He usually does not work on the car, but the crew is working furiously on the car to get the body done. This is Steve Gibbs, competition director of the National Hot Rod Association, who had the authority to either say yes or no on Raymond Beadle's repair job. Steve, is that repair job safe?
We feel it's safe. Our tech directors have looked at the car, and in their opinion, it is safe, and there's some good mechanics working on that car right now, and I think that the car is safe for this run, and we have all intention of letting it run.
The Blue Max lost its top in the semifinal.
I think somewhat, but they're also my buddies, And so, I was in a position, my job, I had a pretty important stature, I guess, within the sport there for quite a few years. And at times they had to be my children. And there's times I had to get them behind the barn and deal with them and put my finger in their chest and tell them what had to take place. And for the most part, they respected it. I never got hit. Well, I did. I got hit one time by a racer, but that, that's another story.
Who hit you?
Of all people, and it's kind of funny, never got hit by a guy. I got hit by a female racer, and it was Judy Lilly. And it was kind of in jest, but she came up to me one time and did an issue over rules, and she was mad about something or other. She hauled off and hit me right in the middle of the chest, just as hard as she could hit me, NHRA rules, and it stung, I just had to grab her and shake her a little bit, but that's the only time I ever got punched by a racer. There's a couple things I wish I could have maybe gone a little further on the decision thing. I think we had the World Championship Pro Stock thing. It wound up with a showdown kind of between Frank Iacono and Lee Shepard at Orange County. And something happened in one of the races, and Iacono got beat, and I think Reed was in the other car. And it's one of those deals you look back on and there was just something not right about that race, the way the times worked out. But I didn't have enough to go back and say we got to change this, and it wound up. It could have cost Iacono the world championship, and I just wish it would have been cleaner and clearer as to who the right guy won. And I always agonized over the fact that I couldn't just on my own, without any benefit of some electronics malfunction, that I could put my finger on, say this is the problem we had, and we got to redo it, you know. And it's. But it's that way in other things, you know. It might be the world championship ball game, and when you see the video, the guy really was out of bounds, or you know, it was the call could have been different, but it wasn't. But I always kind of, you know, that was Frank Iacono's probably one shot at becoming a world champion, and I think something happened that may have affected that, and that's kind of bothered me. It's hard. I mean, they're friends, and there's. Over the years, you know, quite a few of them, and it's the life we chose. You know, there's a risk in any high-speed thing you do. Whether you're flying airplanes or skiing down the mountains, there's a risk. And I think there was a period of time where the cars they weren't as safe as they are today, and we lost people, and it was hard. And I went to quite a few funerals and gave quite a few eulogies, and it's something you have to accept, and it doesn't make it easy. And they were tough, and again, there's no schooling for that. It's just an emotional thing, and I guess you take comfort in the fact that we were doing something we chose to do. We enjoyed doing it. That was our life, and it happened. And I guess I hope I would have dealt with it the same way I did then. It was to try to run the race the best I knew how, try to schedule the events to run on time and see that the races went off the way they're supposed to go. I suppose if an issue came up where the media was all over me for an answer about something, I may not have the best on-camera presence than someone else might have as far as dealing with the media, but I guess my whole life I've just tried to be as honest as I can and tell you what's happening, you know. And but I, as far as actually running the events, what I did as competition director, I hope I'd try to do it pretty much the way I did back then.
Did you guys ever like argue?
I'll be honest with you, near never. When Wally hired me, I mean, number one, that was a big compliment. And what's kind of odd is he hired me to be the ad director for National Dragster. I wasn't hired as the competition guy with NHRA. There was an opening in the company with National Dragster, and at Indy in 1969, he came to me and said, "You want to come to work for us?" Yeah, I did. I mean, I really didn't have a job at that time. I was kind of freelancing. So I said, I'm not an ad salesman, Wally. He said, well, I think you can do it and we can get through this. So I went to work and I did okay selling ads. And about 6 months later, Jack Hart was really the mover and shaker at NHRA at that time. He worked there longer than Wally did, because Wally, he stayed with Hot Rod Magazine quite a few years after NHRA was really going, you know, and so Wally actually only worked for NHRA proper a little bit longer than I did, because he was at Peterson and Hot Rod. But anyway, Jack Hart came to me and said, we really need you over in the competition department. That's what I want you to do. And they hired Bob Vandergriff, who was there for a lot of years as the ad guy, and I went to work in the competition department as Jack Hart's, second guy. But going back to what you said about Wally, hardly ever did Wally come to me and say, I want you to do something, or I don't like what you did, we want to change this. He gave his people a lot of authority, and he stood behind them, and very seldom did he even second guess anything you did. And I think there's a lot of misconception about Wally, and maybe how he ran NHRA. And I think it's sad because a lot of people, he was kind of the, you know, almost the enemy. He was Big Brother. He was, you know, the guy that sat up there, and that's an unfair, I think, characterization of Wally. Wally was a car guy. He loved cars. He loved hot rods. He wasn't into the big show production as much as he was guys out racing in their cars, car club activity, Bonneville racing. The money was not the motivating factor. That's where Wally came from, and I always felt bad that a lot of guys, I think, gave him a bum rap. I had to deal with both of them, and they had their issues. I think there was probably a lot more mutual respect that went on between them than some people will give credit for. They obviously had their encounters and their differences over the way the sport was going to go, and they're both high-powered people, and you know they both had their place. I think it was. I think Wally was a little more predictable in the way he dealt with things than Garlitz was, but I dealt with Wally a lot more. Garlitz was, you know, a high-powered guy, and he's earned every accolade that's come down his way as far as racing. He's won everything there is to win. He didn't seem to want to share much of the glory, though, when it come to other things, and I think that's always something bothered me a little bit. When somebody else accomplished something, he was kind of reluctant to, I think, spread the glory around. He really liked being the guy, and he earned it all. I mean, there's not a person in the world that'll deny the fact that when they made him the #1 drag racing guy of all time, he's him. That's the guy. There's no doubt about it. But there are a lot of other guys not far behind that I think somehow didn't get maybe the same amount of credit that they should have. I know there was a period of time between NHRA and IHRA and AHRA. It got pretty tough. I mean, there was a period where NHRA almost disappeared in a part of the country. They had the Dallas Motorplex, you know, and Carrier bought it, and IHRA was going pretty strong at that time, and AHRA was pretty stout, and we wound up going to a place in Louisiana with the first, you know, Cajun Nationals, just to let everybody know NHRA still exists, because there was hardly any NHRA activity in that whole part of the country, and I think NHRA endured. I think they tried to keep taking the high road on the decisions they made and the kind of races and stuff they did, and I think slowly. I think when Jim Tice died, that kind of put AHRA, you know, pretty much put them out. And then when Carrier, you know, it transitioned, and IHRA still obviously exists, but NHRA has maintained its status, I think, as the top sanctioning body. Even with whatever criticism comes its way, they're still there. They've endured, and I think the main thing, they've been able to keep the sport pretty safe, insurable, respectable, and it's as time goes on, I think it gets tougher, but they've endured. I think for me, I did. I think I had been on the road for 30 years, you know, running these races. There's a price to pay for that. There's a lot of birthdays you miss and your kids, and you know, you're getting older. I mean, you kind of get wore out, and I think I reached a point, and then when the museum came along, I could see the means to kind of take the knowledge I had accumulated and put it over there into the museum, and kind of step aside on the national event thing, and still stay involved. I never really just walked away. I just kind of changed hats, and I still do stuff for NHRA. Anytime there's historical things that they want to do at their events, I'm there. I'm still on the board of directors for the museum, and so I haven't gone anywhere, but it was time to let somebody else take that ball and run with it. Maybe, you know, when they're putting me in the ground, that whoever's saying the words over me said, the guy did okay. He you know, he did a good job, and he worked hard, and and never let it go to his head. I've tried never to do that. I've tried never to let whatever authority that I've had to misuse it. You know, you have to at times use your authority, but to misuse it, I've tried to avoid that. So I guess just, hey, the guy was fair.